Again, I want to welcome you to D.C., welcome you to Remember the Mandate Summit. Amen. And what I'd like to do is show you a quick clip, and I'm going to talk to you about the mandate, and then we're going to have our speaker.
You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities. Knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friend, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, and every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, "My country, 'tis of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when this happens, and when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last, praise God Almighty, we are free at last.
Y'all remember that speech. You could listen to that speech and it's just as compelling today as it was 50 years ago. One of the things that we saw quickly was in the context of that speech was it talks about continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi, go back to Alabama, go back to South Carolina, go back to Georgia, go back to Louisiana, go back to the slums and the ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Then he ends, it says, let us not wallow in the valley of despair. And what we felt is that we need to title this in this regards is that when we hear that mandate, as all of us listen to that and perhaps have various emotions, which I do too. I think about my mother was actually right on the corner where she showed me where she was standing when that march was taking place. But actually hearing it today and understanding that he never said, come to D.C., build a welfare state in our communities, depend on government to get us through. He said, go back to your community. Go back to where you're from. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to your northern cities. And then we have to do that work. And so I think the mandate still remains as we look at it 50 years later. There's still a mandate that's there that says we have to continue to work in our communities, to work with the fervency that he talked to us about, and to work to say we can't depend and allow our communities to depend on these things that are creating more suffering and creating more servitude to something that shouldn't be there. Meaning that we have to have our own sense of independence, our own sense of freedom, our own sense of liberty. When he talked about let freedom ring, it's let freedom ring. And so I think freedom for us should be a thing where we begin to think about this even deeper, that there was a mandate that he gave. And maybe our mandate here, and this is what we could learn together, is really to think about what he talked about in terms of going back, and for us to absorb some of the people that may come in front of us to help educate us, to help equip us as we think about these things deeper. So I encourage you, we're serious, and that mandate was serious, and that's why we're talking about remember the mandate. To that moment, I don't want to stop at all. I want to introduce the Honorable Bob McEwen. His clear and humorous style of speaking will leave you with answers and questions you've always had and didn't know who to ask. It's a quote often heard about him in his speech, and he's a former congressman from Ohio. He speaks in conferences around the world, uncovers the part that God and free enterprise have played in America and the envy of the world. And even if you heard in that speech, it talks about America must do these to be great. So if we lose, and so it talks about in here in his bio, if we lose our appreciation for those pillars of right and work, we will see the disintegration of the great American culture. Bob was chosen by his colleagues to be a member of the Covenant Intelligence Committee when he was in Congress, and also in the Rules Committee, which oversees all legislation in the House of Representatives. He was also a member of the U.S. delegation to the European Parliament for over 10 years. He currently serves as the executive director for the Washington Council for National Policy. him and his wife Liz, and I'll tell you, you don't see his wife Liz, but if you did, she is a phenomenal dresser and typically outdresses Bob McEwen. And he is a sharp-dressed man himself. But anyway, they have 4 children, 8 grandchildren, make their homes reside in Cincinnati, Ohio, and also down here in Virginia, because we got them here in Fairfax Station, Virginia. But let's welcome Bob McEwen.
Thank you, Derek, so very, very much. And it was just as mentioned, it's intimidating enough to be with all these professional, talented speakers and pastors. That's enough. But then to follow Martin Luther King, that's a pretty serious setup. But I'm grateful and honored to be here, to be with you. What you do is I greatly admire it and respect it. Being a politician and being a pastor is often similar skills, not the least of which is that both of us we're responsible, we have all the responsibility but no authority. That is, if you're in government or if you're in business or you're in the military, you can tell people what to do. But pastors can't tell anybody what to do, but if it goes wrong, it's his fault. And that can be challenging at times. Also, people make up stories about you and things, and there's nobody that you can trust. You know, a politician can't go to the newspaper, and a politician can't go to the opposition party. Pastor can't go to his board and say, you know, I've been hitting the bottle a little bit too lately, and so you're always on, but you can't trust anybody. And then also you have a partner, you have a life partner that maybe didn't sign up for this program. And if there's any perks in our job, it's Congressman, why don't you come to the head table and pray? And Pastor, why don't you come to the head table? And people will walk over top of a pastor's wife if you let them. And yet people will say things to a pastor's wife they would never, or a politician's wife, they'd never say to the principal. So they have none of the upside and all the downside. And so I just greatly admire and respect and appreciate it. The scripture says, pray for those in authority over us. And so for those of you in positions of authority in the church, I honor you for doing that, number one. Number two is, it's a room full of talented speakers. You're going to have a great time. And you've traveled all day long, and I'm first on the menu. So I understand how it's going to be, but let me just walk through a couple of things. And to try to do what I can, let me see if I can do something to make this function. There it is. What I want to do is to touch on some things that might be helpful to you, because if sincerity does not make things work well. I was thinking that Mike Huckabee said the other day that he came home one day and his son had made a beautiful, beautiful cake. And it just looked so great, and he was so proud of it. And he gave him a piece, and he took a bite, and it was all the discipline he could have to keep from just spitting the thing out. It was horrible. And so he began to ask him a little bit about how he did it. Did he follow the instructions? Yes, I did. Yeah. Well, one thing I did, and he said, I couldn't find the sugar. So I put in salt. And he meant well, but it doesn't work. And we have people that mean well, but they're destroying our schools, and they're destroying our libraries, and they're destroying our neighborhoods. And we can sense it, but then the question is, what do we do about it? And I'm here to tell you joyfully that it's not complicated. It can be fixed. It can be fixed very easily if we understand what to do. So I'm glad that the Lord put his hand on Star, and you know, if you get in the back wind of her moving, I'm telling you, she is a force of nature. And what she's doing for the cause and for all of us to move in her wake, we're honored to do so, and I'm pleased to be here with you. So, I'm Pentecostal, so I might have to pray for this thing a little bit in order to get it to work. A quick observation about America. Half of all the people on earth live on less than $2 a day. Half of those, that'd be a fourth of the people, live on less than $1 a day. The second richest spot on earth is Western Europe, France, Germany, Britain. In America, we have a level below which we will not permit a person to sink. You come to this country, gripe and complain, sit on a park bench, we will bury you. Stamps for food, a roof over your head, a bed to sleep, unlimited health care, unlimited education for you and anybody you've ever met. A person living in poverty in America. This is done in the Wall Street Journal Heritage Foundation Rector study every 24 months for the last 30-some years. A person living in poverty in America is more likely to have a telephone, a television, an air conditioner, an automobile, eats more meat, has more square footage space than the average resident of the second richest spot on earth, Western Europe. Throughout much of Latin America and elsewhere, the socialist governments have allowed the air traffic control system to atrophy and rust. Planes flying all over the world are using a global positioning system conceived, invented, and maintained by Americans. A Mercedes dealer ordering a part from Buenos Aires to Frankfurt is using an internet conceived, invented, and maintained by Americans. This nation has blessed the world like no place else. 4% of the population of the world call themselves Americans, 4%. Yet every year there are more books, more plays, more symphonies, more copyrights, more inventions than the other 96% combined. It's important to understand why. The population of the United States, 300 million, that's the same as Indonesia, 300 million. The gross domestic product, the goods and services produced by Indonesia, same population. The GDP of Indonesia is smaller than the state of Louisiana. Now, imagine if everybody in America had to live off of what is produced in Louisiana. The sixth largest nation on earth, 200 million Pakistanis, 220 million, produce less wealth than the state of Arkansas. 91 million Filipinos, less wealth every year than 3 million Oklahomans. That freedom creates wealth, and it's important if we understand how, if you understand it, you can make any poor place rich. If you do the wrong thing, you make any rich place poor. And so politics is made up of only two things. Politics is the strength of a nation. If you understand this, you can be president of Nicaragua tomorrow, and in 5 years, you can make it one of the richest nations on earth. There's only two dials that you turn. I don't care if you're running for president in Baghdad or Brussels or Buenos Aires or Boston. There's only two. One is, I call integrity, right and wrong, a spiritual value system. And the other is economics, and that is how much government takes from people that produce. And the higher the integrity and the lower the burden of government, the greater the wealth. The lower the integrity, the more bars you have to put on the window, the more chains you have to put on the bicycles, the more lawyers you need to oversee every contract that you sign, the more people you have to bribe to get a permit. The lower the integrity and the higher the cost of government, the greater the poverty. Period, end of discussion. That's all you need to know. And how we adjust those two dials determines whether or not a place is rich or a place is poor. Let's go through it. First of all, you remember when Moses was having a hard time, he was trying to keep 6.5 million Jews happy, and he was getting worn out. And so his father-in-law said to him, he said, you can't do this. He said, you need to break people up into hundreds and fifties and tens, into federal, state, and local government. And then you need to put people in charge of them. And I don't have time to write you a book or a PhD course. I'm just going to tell you, there are three things, Moses, that you need to be in a position of authority. Three things. If you do this, you prosper. If you don't, you try to cheat on them, it won't work. Number one is provide out of the people able men such that fear God. Now, fear is the Old English term for respect. You fear the king. First of all, you have to have those people that fear God. Now, let me tell you, of all the philosophy books in the world, every barroom brawl, every schoolyard scuffle boils down to two words, and that is who says. And there's only two answers to that, only two. One is what I say, and the other is what God says. And that's it. There are only two worldviews. Either you believe that God created man, or you believe that man created God. That's it. Now, you can go to the philosophy books in any bookstore, any library, and pull it by page 5. You can tell which one they choose. If you choose God, then God has a way of doing it. If you do man, let me tell you, that means that man thinks he's God. We're told you don't want to marry a person who thinks they're God. Let me tell you something. You don't want to go into business with somebody who thinks they're God. You don't want to have a leader who thinks they're God. So the only two options are either you believe that man created God or you believe that God created man. Now, from this, everything else flows. Everything else flows. If you believe that man created God, then you believe that man is his own standard. If you believe that God created man, then you believe that God has a standard. If you believe that man is his own standard, you believe that man is basically good. Now, once you see these, you can listen to a politician for 60, 90 seconds. You can tell where they think. You believe that man is, by what standard would he not be good? But if you know that God doesn't consider us perfect, people who only think they're perfect are people who think that they're also God. Thirdly, if he does anything wrong and he's good, it can't be his fault. It's got to be somebody else's fault. So if a person comes in here and starts shooting people, we know intuitively that that's wrong, but it can't be his fault because he's good. So whose fault is it? Well, it's got to be the gun's fault. That gun coming in here doing those nasty things. You need to regulate that gun. Can you imagine that gun coming in doing that sort of thing? I've always wondered, you know, if guns kill people, how does anyone ever get out of a gun show alive? But, but we understand the individual is responsible under God. Let's go to the next one. If rights don't come from God, from where do they come? They come from the group. So when you listen to a politician, he'll talk about gay rights. He'll talk about women's rights. He'll talk about Hispanic rights. There are no blonde, left-handed rights. There's only rights that come from God. And if you do away with God, the whole thing goes haywire. Now, that's the basic principle, and that's fundamental. Rights do not, God didn't give rights to people based upon their gender or their skin color. He gave them because he made them, and they're equal in his sight. And any effort to make them different is ungodly, and as we're going to see, it's un-American. And that is, how does this work out? If you can't hold people accountable, then anything that has to be done right, you have to have government do it. Government has to tell you the size of a toilet to flush. They have to tell you the power of the light bulb, the kind of straw that you can use. Government has to tell, and these people have an infinite capacity to do government. These people want a limited government. These people will always want more taxes. How do you get more government? More taxes. But no politician ever says, I really, really want more taxes. He always begins with this: I am opposed to more taxes. But at this situation, at this particular time, in the history of our library, in the situation at our school, in the condition in which our city finds itself, because of the state, they always, always, always want more taxes. Now, they always claim that they don't, but that's exactly what they do. I'll just give you, since I'm allowed to do this, because I know these people. I campaigned opposite Bill Clinton over and over and over. And Bill Clinton never opened his mouth to speak about what he said. He wanted a tax cut for all working Americans. He'd say it every time. He'd go to pump gas. I want a tax cut for all working Americans. He said it over and over and over. When he got elected in November. He couldn't make it till January. He got sworn in. Second week of December. You can get this on YouTube. Second week of December. It comes out, bites his lip, carries on. He says, you'll never guess. I just have to have the largest tax increase in the history of America. Now, I could have told you that, and I can tell you, whoever the candidate is on that side of the aisle, I can tell you 20 years from now that that's what they're going to say. If they're running for governor or for mayor of Cincinnati or whatever, these people will always want more taxes because that gives you more government. The other people on the other side will want less government. Fewer taxes. Okay, next is this. Now, they always want a strong defense, where these people, those people want a weak defense, these people want a strong defense. Now, this always gives Katie Couric heartburn, because she says, you people always, you claim you want a limited government, and you want more taxes, and you want, but you want a weak defense. So you say you want limited government, fewer taxes, but you always vote for a strong defense. And the answer to that is right, because a limited government gives us more freedom, fewer taxes gives us more freedom, and a strong defense protects our freedom, and that is what government is supposed to do. And finally, this is, since I am the standard, I can decide that marriage is between 3 men and a horse. And then I can make it a hate crime for you to do what you just did. Since I'm the standard, I can determine that for you, if you don't teach this in your school, and if you don't use the proper language, whereas these people who understand that there is a God understand traditional family values, or there's another word for that. It's e pluribus unum. That is, diversity. These people always want to talk about dividing up. Let me tell you, diversity does not help anything. It doesn't help a football team. It doesn't help. Diversity in leading a family is chaos. The reason when you go in the Army, they give you the same haircut and the same uniform is because unity builds strength. And America is from many one. You become one. You don't become a diverse group. You don't, because there aren't rights for different people. Now, how does this, what's next here? So, Derek, we go from those that fear God, and then the next one is men of truth. Now, God said there's only three things you're going to have. Number one is, don't get somebody who thinks they're God. Number two is somebody who understands truth. Now, this is critical. What is truth? I can say this room is 25 feet wide. You can say it's 35. Somebody else say it's 40. Somebody say it's 15. We're all happy until somebody comes in and measures it. And when that person measures it, that measurement is truth. Everything else is just opinion. But here's the significance of truth. Truth reveals error. So if I said 3 times during the course of this presentation it's 25 feet wide, and somebody comes in, they don't have to be strong, they don't have to be big, they don't have to weigh a lot, truth has its own power. So a little 10-year-old can come in here and measures it and come to find out it's 32. She doesn't have to do anything, she doesn't have to beat me, all she has to do is walk out. Everybody in this room knows that what I said was wrong. So error hates truth, because truth reveals error. Number one. Number two, truth overcomes error. So I remember when George Bush, I was listening to the radio one day, and the news came on and said that the president had said that Al-Qaeda was no longer a threat. And they immediately cut away to de Villepin, who was the foreign minister for France, and he said, I can't understand why the president of the United States would say that's silly, that Al-Qaeda is a threat, it's a severe threat, and everybody else, and members of Congress, they all start doing all that. And that it was the lead story on the evening news. The next morning, one newspaper had a little vignette on the front page. I don't know if you remember or not, but when George Bush started the war in Iraq, he had the 52 deck of cards, and he had the leaders of Al-Qaeda on all 52 cards. And it was after an event in the Rose Garden, as he was leaving to go back into the White House, somebody shouted at him and said, Mr. President, how's your deck of cards coming? And he stops, he turns around, he said, well, 42 of them, of the leaders of Al-Qaeda, 42 of them are either dead or incarcerated. Either way, they are no longer a threat. So the Washington Times put that quote, and then underneath it they had the New York Times quote, which said, President Bush said, the leaders of Al-Qaeda, ... no longer a threat. And that's what everybody had been believing. Well, that was on Reuters and on BBC and NBC and CBS, but one newspaper did, and then Fox put it on a loop every 15 minutes or so, and then Rush Limbaugh felt obligated to talk about it for about 3 hours. And in the course of a day, everybody knew that truth overcomes error, and pointed out what they did. Therefore, error hates truth, because truth overcomes error. Well, we know who is truth. I am the way, the truth. That's why you can go at an inaugural, you can pray in the name of Mother Earth and eagle feathers and everything, and nobody cares. But you pray in the name of Jesus Christ, all hell will break loose. Why? Because error cannot tolerate truth, because truth overcomes error. That's why you can't have one conservative professor on a college campus. If you have one, that's why you can't even let them come speak for an evening. You have to demonstrate and scream and shout them down and throw stuff. Why? Because the truth overcomes the error. Conservatives don't do that. People who believe in truth, they don't have to shout down the error people. They don't care. They wait till they're all finished and they just tell the truth. And the truth overcomes the error. So we'll go back here. So the final, let's go to the third part, and that's going to take some work. Okay. We hold these truths to be self-evident. which, as I say, is a gracious Jeffersonian way of saying any idiot ought to understand this. It is self-evident, bozo. You'd be blind, deaf, and dumb. You know that all men are created equal and are endowed by a 5-4 decision of the Supreme Court. No, are endowed by their Creator. Hit it, bro. And there you go. Endowed with certain inalienable rights. Now, where do rights come from? See, this is essential. This is essential. Because when you listen to a politician, he said, we have a right. I remember Nancy Pelosi got up when she was talking about the change in the health care system. She walked up, she said, today we are going to create a right to health care. All right, if a politician can create a right, a politician can do away with a right. And there's a term for that when politicians can do away with your rights. It's called tyranny. And our rights don't come from the group because you can't trust them. And so, and it's endowed with certain inalienable rights, and among those are life. Next one there, life, liberty. Notice the sequence. See, liberty is a precious little value if you're dead. You have to have life first, then liberty, and then sewer systems and overpasses. But the first thing you do is life. So anybody that tells you, when you say, who do I vote for? Very, very simply, there it is. Any politician that will take innocent life will not hesitate to take your liberty. And Derek, hit the next one. So people say, well, I don't want government involved, and this is between a woman and her doctor. And you're in the wrong country, honey, because when our country was formed to secure these rights, governments are the purpose of the United States government is to preserve innocent life and preserve liberty. So when anybody says, well, you know, I'm just running for sheriff and I'm right to life, that doesn't matter. We always ask anybody who would come to work for us and say, well, how do you feel about abortion? Well, I'm just supposed to be receptionist. That's my personal opinion. I don't think I should have to. Yeah, that's right. You're absolutely right, ma'am. Forgive me. Just don't let the door hit you on the way out. Because it's a worldview. It's a worldview. If you can take innocent life, everything else is immaterial. I can take your liberty. I can tell you all kinds of things to do. So let's go to what's. Oh, let me just say this one final thing about our Creator. You understand? John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by Him, and without Him was not anything made that was made. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Okay, now who's that? Jesus Christ. Jesus, so man is endowed by Jesus Christ. Man is endowed by God. Man is endowed by his Creator. They're synonyms. They all mean the same thing. That's where our rights come from. That's what makes America unique. There's no place else on earth where life is guaranteed to be protected. A Jew could be chased from all over the planet. If they could just get under the canopy of protection of the American flag, they knew that they would be safe. So protecting life is what America is. And just as those people who went 150 years trying to do away with liberty, now that same crowd is just hell-bent on doing away with life. I mean, they are just bent on that. Let's go to the final one. I got 5 more minutes, and we go to questions. Who are such a men that fear God, lovers of truth, and hating socialism. Now, isn't that interesting? When God only has 3 things, he has time to tell you, here's the people you want. Number 3, don't get anybody that believes in socialism. Covetousness is taking what somebody else has. In America, I did the prayer breakfast down in Costa Rica, and the Attorney General there is a good friend. We went out to eat the night before, and we went to the restaurant. We stood there, and the ladies went in to eat, and we're standing there by the car talking forever and ever and ever. And after a while, I said, "Want egg? The food's in there." Yeah, Bob. And we just kept talking until eventually somebody materialized out of somewhere. He gave him some money, and we went in to have dinner. He had to pay someone to watch his car while we were having dinner. Why? Because people covet his car. I grew up in a little town in Appalachia. In our town, 5,000, there were 3 Cadillacs in that town, 3 of them, all black. All 3 of them belonged to the 3 funeral homes in town. And the way that they advertised when they had a funeral was that they would put that beautiful Cadillac limousine out there, and it would sit there in front of the funeral home. And when people going by, oh, that's where so-and-so's funeral's today. And I would ride my bicycle, and I would go sit under a tree, and I would look at that car, and I would say, someday I'm going to have a car like that. It never once crossed my mind to say, why don't I go steal it? No, I didn't covet what they had. In America, we don't covet what somebody else has. We want to say, someday I want to have a house like that. Someday I want to have a car like that. Under socialism, it's where you want to take what somebody else has. Let me explain why that is. If you go to Mexico, you cannot go into the trucking business in Mexico. You cannot go into the gas station business. You can't go into the grocery distribution business. Why? Because it's socialist. What is socialist? Socialist is government control of the tools of production. So government controls the trucking company. Government controls the grocery stores. Government controls these other businesses. And if you grow up under that environment, under socialism, you have no hope of being there. Put that on a shelf for a second. I'm going to come back to it. I was in Indonesia, and we're getting the country team briefing at the embassy there, and they gave from the foreign policy and the political attaché and the agriculture attaché and the defense attaché, and then we're all finished. You can actually learn more about the country in 2 hours than if you lived there for a year. But when we're leaving, the ambassador said this. He said, watch out for people standing along the side of the road for seemingly no reason. They will heave bricks at American cars when they go by. Question would be, why? All right? We already described what the wealth is like in Indonesia. So if somebody is wealthy in Indonesia, who are they? There's somebody that has a relationship with the government because it's socialism. So and that person standing along the side has no hope of ever being what that person is. Therefore, they are jealous and dislike rich people because they don't have a chance. And in America and under free enterprise, you don't get that from the government. If you can float into Los Angeles at 5 in the morning, you can own 3 7-Elevens by midnight. In America, because you can go into business for yourself because government doesn't control the individual business. And how do you become successful? You become successful under free enterprise by only one way, by blessing other people, so that people voluntarily reach in their pocket and give you a reward for having done something for them. So let's take that just a little bit. I'll tell you what, I'm going to come back to that. Remind me to come back to it. Let's walk through how government impacts. Derek, the first one. This is 95% of all the economics you'll ever need to know. Here it is. We're going to walk through it real quickly. Let's say this represents 100% of the income of any city or any state or any nation. Let us say that it represents a $100 bill. And you go into Walmart, and the most expensive thing in the store is $99. That means you're completely free to choose anything in the store. Let's suppose someone comes along and takes 25% of it away from you. What happens? Two things. Number one, you have fewer choices. There are some things, if you only got $75, it goes up to $95. There are some things you cannot choose. Freedom is having choices. The more choices I take away from you, the less freedom you have. Anybody ever raised a teenager has had this debate. And finally, the more money I take away from you, you have a lower standard of living. Now, anybody would understand this unless they're with the New York Times. But if I take money away from you, you're worse off. Suppose someone take 50%, even fewer choices, less freedom. Suppose 25, I'll leave you with 25, fewer choices. Suppose I come along and take it all. What do we call a person who works all day, keeps nothing? That person is called a slave. Now, here's the point. There are two people that can come and take money away from you. One is called a criminal, has a gun, and can take money away from you. The other is called the government, has a gun, and it can take money away from you. Here's the point. The impact is the same. So you go to the pay window, you walk out across the parking lot, a fellow comes up, puts a gun in your ribs, says, I want 50% of everything you've got. You take the money, you sit home with your wife and children, here's how much money we have for food, clothing, and shelter, this kind of car we can drive, the kind of vacation we can take, or you make it all the way to your truck, you open the paycheck, you say, Uncle Sam's already been here. It's half gone already. The impact is the same. So here's the point. No, go back to the chart. So the impact is the same. And here's what all you need to know about politics. The greater the freedom, the greater the wealth. The greater the government, the greater the poverty. In politics is which direction do you go on this direction? You can make any rich place poor. I when I was in the state legislature in Ohio was #1 in new job creation, #1 out of the 50 states. We elected a governor, said we can put a stop to this. And so when when the current governor took office, we were 49th out of it. So that's what politics is. That's what, when Margaret Thatcher took over and the British pound sterling was controlled by the International Monetary Fund, it was becoming a third world nation. She cut taxes, gave her more freedom. The country began to revive it again. And when she left, it was the 4th largest economy in the world. That's what it is. Let's walk through the next ones, Derek. It's going to take a lot of pumping to get through. And then I apologize for this, you all. You're very gracious to put up with my presentation here. So the concluding part about, just run all the way through, just as fast as you can. See, North and South Korea, same heritage, same culture, same climate. One has poverty. 10% of the population of North Korea starved over the last decade. South Korea, same heritage, culture, climate, language, got freedom, and they have the 10th largest GDP in the world. That's what Nagasaki was. The richest nation on earth at that time was Detroit. This is Detroit now. 49,000 single-family dwellings have been abandoned in Detroit. You can make any rich place poor. Okay, let's just leave that there for a second. So let's conclude with this, and then if there's a question, we'll do it. If a person is going down the road out here, there's only 2 ways that I can get money out of that person's pocket. Only 2. One is called free enterprise. That's where I do something good. I lay awake nights figuring out how to do something for them such that they'll slam on their brakes and pull in and say, oh, you're going to clean my car and dust off and sweep the floor and wash the windows. I'd much rather have that than have this $10 bill. I'd much rather have that pair of shoes than this $50. A GPS unit, I'll never get lost again. I'd much rather have that than have this $200. And so under free enterprise, you figure out ways to do something good for the person such that they are willing to reach in their pocket voluntarily reach in their pocket and make an exchange, which at the end of the exchange, they are both better off. They have created wealth. And that's the only way that wealth is created. A farmer has a pile of wheat. A baker has 10 empty ovens. Baker says, if I had his wheat, I could bake donuts in the morning. The baker says, I don't need his wheat. If I had his money, I could put a new roof on, buy a new tractor. And so the 2 of them come together and they make an exchange, which at the end of the exchange, they are both better off. And if they're not, they don't make the exchange. They have created wealth. Now, I said there are 2 ways to get. The other one is very simply, is if I just come and I take it. If I come and take it. So a person pulls up to the stoplight and I put a gun in the window and say, I want half of everything in your purse. Have I created any wealth? No. Have I redistributed wealth? Yes, from your purse to mine. And when you listen to Bernie Sanders, every 3rd sentence, the way wealth is distributed, we're going to redistribute wealth in this country. That makes as much sense to those of us that are farm boys. If you drive across the country, when you go through Iowa, mile after mile of corn, and then you get out to Nebraska, mile after mile of wheat, and then you get out to Colorado, and you got cattle everywhere, and it'd be all. And then you give a speech in Denver, Colorado. It is just terrible the way corn is distributed in this country. Well, corn is not distributed; it's grown. Wealth is not distributed; it's created. And if a person creates wealth, then they have it. So if you redistribute it from the person that has it, is wealth created? No. The degree to which you take it is the degree to which that person is diminished. So no wealth has been created, and that person is worse off. The degree to which you do that is the degree to which you discourage people from creating wealth, and which you reward people that didn't do it, and you take the richest nation in Latin America 10 years ago and make it the 3rd poorest as we speak. Venezuela, my sister-in-law is Venezuelan. She has a 70-year-old brother who is a retired dentist who worked hard and had a $3,500 a month pension, and that $3,500 a month would take care of him well. It is now worth less than $2. And he now lives with my sister in Fort Lauderdale, and he goes around and rakes some leaves and does some things, because if he can make $100 and send it back home, it keeps them alive. Socialism only fails every time. Freedom only works every time. Now, let me just tell you, Satan is slick. and he'll make it sound good to do what's wrong. And when you and there's these Christian schools where I go to, they have me come and speak because the folks that were very active in left-wing politics in the 60s when I was young, Jim Wallace and those fellas, and now they formed a thing called Sojourners and all, and they come up and they speak to these young kids in the Christian schools. They say, Jesus never talked about abortion, and Jesus never talked about homosexual marriage, but Jesus had a lot to say about helping the poor, Now, these right-wing politicians, they're always talking about abortion, and they're always talking about a man and a woman being married, and who do we want to be like? Do we want to be like Jesus? Or do we want to be like these hateful people that are always talking about it? And they just lead them right off a cliff. Well, you respond to it very simply. In the scriptures, there are 3 institutions that are created. One is the family. Secondly is the church. And thirdly is the government. And they're absolutely right. 412 times it talks about helping the poor. 2/3 of the time it talks about you and me helping the poor. 1/3 of the time it talks about the church. And then I have my Bible with me, and I tell them, I say, I don't need a book. I don't need a chapter. I'll take a verse anywhere. One verse where it says that a politician should use the police power of the state to take from one group and give to another, and for that he gets brownie points in heaven. I said, listen, if that's the program, sign me up. I'm for it. But there isn't any. But they make it look noble that if I use the government to take money from you, that somehow or another that's good. It never has been, and it never will be. God's way works every time. It works for marriage. It works for business. It works for a nation. Man's way will destroy a marriage, will destroy a family, and will destroy a nation. God bless.
Thank you. There you go. No problem. How many people enjoyed that? Good. I would love to have a question answered. Let me do this. I am going to ask you, if you got maybe 2 or 3 questions, I'd love to take that, and then I will get this wonderful gentleman back up and be able to answer. But anybody have any pressing questions from what we just talked? One thing we want to make sure we do is dialogue back and forth a bit. And so you got a challenging question? We'd love to throw it at Bob McEwen. Yes, sir. Pastor Luke Robinson. That's okay.
Let me say this. It is much, much better than what I did tonight. And I have it on a DVD, and I'd be glad to make it available to you. But I am an economist, and I know that if you give somebody something, it'll lay at the bottom of their trunk for the next 6 years. But if you charge them something, so it cost me about $12 to make them, we'll sell them for $5, okay? If you sell them for $5, that means only people, and you'll watch it. And if you'll watch it, it's really not complicated. And in truth, once you see it, then you can figure it out and follow it. And I would love to. We'll make those available, and I don't know quite how you work it out, but I would love for you to have it. I really, really would. I care very, very deeply about what has been done. Socialism is destructive. And the degree to which you have the richest city in the history of mankind was Detroit, Michigan. Not close. 18%, nearly 20% richer than any place. It's now the poorest city north of the Rio Grande. When you do the wrong thing, and yet those people all had good hearts, they meant well, but it's destructive. And then nobody tells them how. And so this DVD will tell you how. Yeah.
Got it. Right back here in the book. Yes, sir. No. Yeah, didn't you have the end? Oh, there you go. Okay. Oh. You got it. That's it.
What about our debt, our government debt? What are we going to do about that?
That's not a good thing. America has been able to get by because After World War II, people had these marks, pieces of paper. They didn't mean anything. They had the lira, they had the franc, and nobody wanted any of them. So America, which is what it's always done, let me just divert for a moment. Nobody in the world is as generous as Americans. I don't care how you can gripe and complain all you want. America will give you, you can call us every name in the book. We will come in there while you're spitting at us. We'll give you, and like I say, America's the only place that's so wonderful that people that hate it won't leave. And so, but one of the things that we did was we said, all right, here's 5 marks. And so if you will invest in Germany and you'll use these marks, and if you don't trust them, you can swap them out for $1. And here we'll do these for the lira for Italy. And we helped get everybody up and going, which meant that the American dollar was used as the same as gold. And they would keep that in a reserve currency. And so that if you had some of those in your bank, then that's the same as having gold. And that's been that way since World War II. There was a tremendous effort by the previous administration to add Chinese yuan to that, so that the people could, when they wanted to, they could cash in the dollars and switch over to yuan. They took a long time to get it done. They got it done in 2015, just about 3 years ago. And fortunately, the country, by the way, we were just on the edge of just about going over a cliff. Let me give you an example. On the Supreme Court, they're out in the middle of the desert in California, in the Mojave Desert. There was in 1919, some soldiers that lost some folks in their company. They went out there and they put up a cross and they put the names of the people that they lost. Now nobody saw it, and you can't find it. It's not on the road. You have to have a four-wheeler to go back, and you have a GPS to even find the thing. But Satan knows where it is, so he's offended. And so the ACLU sued, and it made it all the way to the Supreme Court. They said you had to tear it down. And when they did it, about 2 years ago, when they voted 5-4. Four justices of the Supreme Court, 2 appointed by Obama and 2 appointed by Clinton. The 4 of them said that the Constitution of the United States says you can have no religious symbol, not speech, wouldn't allow that at all. You can't even have a religious symbol on public property. Now, 5-4. That means one more vote on the Supreme Court. One more. And you'd have to take a sandblaster to every courthouse in America. And this country was just on the edge of disappearing. And that's why they're so mad. Because when we're putting people that are Bible believers that pray with their children and all the things that drive them crazy, we're putting those kind of people on the Supreme Court, which kicks it for a whole generation away from them, and they are just, Satan is furious. He is absolutely furious. So those 2 principles of financial and godliness, and the debt needs to be stopped.
You got it. I got one more here, Pastor Broden.
Very good information. You're talking about the economy, but behind the idea that is driving what is happening with our economy and those who are attempting to do it to us are sourced in a philosophy. And I think part of what needs to happen here is that we need to understand the idea behind it. The Machiavellian idea, the Saul Alinsky, the Marxists, what they're attempting to do. It is the driving feature. Can you speak to that?
No, you're absolutely right. And you can see where God said, those people hate God. Saul Alinsky and those people, they hate God. They want to substitute government for God. And so it's a spiritual battle. What you do in the course of this, what you do is more important than what anybody ever does. If you don't have the spiritual part right, nothing else works. And so you want to have businesses come into your neighborhood and all that sort of thing, but unless they get the spiritual part right, none of that's going to happen. And so what you're doing is the most noble thing that you can do. I'll remind you, just understand, Satan doesn't like people to do good. And so Paul instructed us not to become weary in well-doing. So when you become weary, and when you think, I could do something else and not have this kind of pressure. The degree to which you're making an impact is the degree to which you arouse opposition. And so when that happens to you, just look to him and remember that You're on his team. And what does he do? People always ask, what's your favorite Bible verse? And I didn't have one for a long time, so I finally figured I'd get one. And here's what I came up with. You ever wonder what the Lord does for a living? You ever wonder what the Lord does when he gets up in the morning? You know, he doesn't drive a truck, and he doesn't build houses. Here's what it does. It says what the Lord does. It says, for the eyes of, 2 Chronicles 16:9, the eyes of the Lord go to and fro throughout the whole earth to show himself strong on behalf of them whose heart is turned toward him. So he's up there, you know, when he gets up in the morning, he's up there and he's looking down, and we got earbuds in our ears, and we're watching Good Morning America, and he's just waiting for somebody to turn towards him so he can show himself strong on our behalf. That's what brings him pleasure. Now, Satan likes to, remember what Satan's plan for your life? Satan's plan for your life is death. He wants your marriage dead. He wants your relationship with your children dead. He wants you morally dead. He wants you financially dead. He wants you mentally dead. He wants you physically dead. All thoughts of suicide. He wants you spiritually dead. Satan's plan for your life is death. But I am come that you might have life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. He that hath the Son hath life. And so in this battle, that when you feel put upon, understand you're on the battlefield with the captain who understands what you're going through, whose entertainment and pleasure for the day is helping you, and therefore do not hesitate to turn toward him, and don't let all of that stuff that Satan tries to put in your head flush it out. So God bless.
Wow.
Thank you, Bob McEwen.